this is I mean, this is a lot of information, but at the same time, it's in on layman's terms so that everyone can understand it. But I think one of the most important questions that I've been getting from processors maybe, and I had a conversation with some folks in northeastern Mexico almost 3 weeks ago. They, as you mentioned, there are some different genetics, and we tend to have more Cebu cattle than you. I mean, here, especially in the Midwest, you won't find that type of cattle. In Mexico, we are starting to have a better quality system when it comes to like compared to the U.S. that we know that a lot of the cattle that it's slaughtered in the U.S. less than 30 months of age. And tender is one thing. I mean, we know that we get the more tender product, but in terms of fiber types and all that, does that has an impact? I mean, age has an impact on fiber types.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I wanted to point out is these are changing over time, right? So they tend to change over time. There's a French scientist that showed these more glycolytic fibers tend to increase as a percentage with time. So they change over time. To give you the best advice on growing cattle and what weight, I think it depends a little bit on the mature size of the animal, for one. You know, that some of them weigh 1,300 pounds, some of them weigh 1,000 pounds, and they're done. I think, relatively speaking, the most efficient thing to do is grow them fast and grow them hard, because that makes them as young as possible with as much groceries in them. And at least in North America, or more importantly, not more importantly, excuse me, Francisco, at least germane to the United States, that's used to fed cattle, you know, get them there as fast as possible. The difference, though, in probably in Mexico and in South America for sure, there's a little bit of you got to get the most efficiency out of them. So if you slaughtered cattle, let's say Nelore cattle from Brazil or eared cattle somewhere, if you slaughter them too young, you don't harvest as much forage that way, right? Which means you don't make as much money. But that's why I think it's fascinating to know the management strategies for different countries in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere are really quite different, and the economic outputs are different too.
We can wrap it up with a little bit of the historically. You mentioned like 20 years ago, you put that you were writing this article or this chapter. Was it a book? Was it when you mentioned about the pig and the collar and that is this where we're going? So
oh yeah, the pork. If you let me think, was it? There's a magazine called Pork, right?
Yeah. And
it was Pork. I think it was Pork 97. So you know.
Okay. All right. So I
that's
guess
a long time ago. Right?
Yeah.